I know that you're going to be able to see it slightly differently from me, but we have Liz Chapman from EC Appointments. Liz is our recruitment expert and doesn't actually employ any staff, so it's going to be very much talking from a recruitment perspective this morning, and also from all the candidates that she speaks to as well. Good morning.
Good morning. Hi, everyone.
Richard Weir is an employer, but he is also a recruitment consultant and works a lot more internationally within a very specific area, and has that balance of trying to run a business and trying to recruit for businesses and balance the needs of that flexible working environment. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning.
Andrew Rhodes is a managing partner at Sobell Rhodes, an accountancy practice, and employs a team of over 40 people, and he's going to talk a little bit about the experience that he's gone through in the last 18 months and what they've done to enable flexibility, but also from a financial and commercial perspective for many of their clients. Good morning, Andrew.
Morning.
Barry Kaye, I've lost track of your numbers, Barry. You're growing exponentially with your staff. How many are you on now? About 60?
I just wrote a piece. No, we're closing in on 100.
Wow. Okay, so has gone through huge amounts of growth in the last 18 months, and has a team which he will talk to us very much about that, managing a team of that size and the implications that this legislation might have on his business. And Fiona is our legal expert. As some of you may know, Fiona used to work for DOHR before she saw the light, and is an employment law specialist with Seddons solicitors. Good morning, Fiona.
Good morning. Hi, I'm sorry you can't see me. I think I've joined under the wrong link, but if you want to send me the panelist link, I can
I don't know that I can do that once this is actually live, I'm afraid.
Right, okay. I'm sorry. I am here though, everyone. Hello.
So I'm going to start off this morning. I was trying to get a poll up, but technology being what it is won't allow me to get the poll up and running. But the question that I've asked on LinkedIn is giving all employees the right to flexible working a good thing for business? Now you can see the chat screen there, so I just want a yes or no from you all in that chat box. Is giving all employees the right to flexible working a good thing for business? Yes or no? So I'll let you put your comments in there. So the reason this discussion has come up this morning is because back in 2019, there was a bill before Parliament which was a move towards flexible working. For obvious reasons, that was all mothballed, but it has come to light again. And I'm going to start off by asking Fiona just to explain what the current legislation is, and then what the proposal is. So Fiona, if you'd like to give us an update.
Hi, yes, thank you. Sorry again, you can't see me, but hopefully you can all hear me okay. So really pleased to be with you this morning talking about this highly topical issue of flexible working, especially as the Prime Minister has just announced this week the lifting of restrictions and workplace guidance, which as of 19th of July will mean there's no requirement to continue to work from home. So to set the scene and just provide context to this debate, I'd just like to mention three key points. Obviously, the first, as Donna said, which is the current legal position regarding flexible working. The second is what the future holds. And then the third point, which we'll no doubt cover during the session, is the legal implications with respect to any changes that will arise, no doubt, if the position changes in the law. So the current legal position is dictated very much by the flexible working regulations, which are really very prescriptive on this issue. And it states at present that employees have the legal right to request to work flexibly, so long as they have 26 weeks service as at the date that they make their application, and provided that they haven't made an application within the preceding 12 months. So it's not an automatic right to work flexibly, it's a right to request to work flexibly. And when we talk about flexible working, especially now in the world of the pandemic, we think of home working, and moving forward we think of hybrid working, but legally flexible working goes much wider than that, and it includes requests to vary hours, obviously to work flexi time, to work from a different location, but also on a job share basis, term time only. So it covers a whole host of things. And there are certain requirements that an employee has to fulfill in order for a request to be valid. And there are certain requirements on the employer that they have to consider the request and only reject it under one of 8 grounds under the flexible working regulations. So so that's the law at the moment, and it's quite prescriptive. The future, however, is much less clear. So we know that the Labour MP Tulip Siddiq has, on the 30th of June, presented a bill to Parliament. And if that bill goes through, and I say that with a big if, but it will mean that employees have the right to request flexible working from day one of employment, and that jobs will need to be advertised as being flexible, which currently there is no legal requirement to do so. So before this creates a big mass panic, it is a bill, and it's what's called a 10-minute rule. So it's also known as a standing order number 3, which is a procedure in Parliament for the introduction of private members' bills, which sometimes happen, but sometimes and often don't. But saying that, it is a really highly topical conversation, and things are certainly going to change. And I think in the short term, the government is going to put the onus on businesses to make their own decisions, and we will hear a lot about personal responsibility, I think, needing to be taken. But in the long term, I think the government will implement a new right to request flexible working, but what the devil will be in the detail, and that sort of remains to be seen. But it won't be an automatic right, I wouldn't have thought, for employees to work flexibly. It will be very much for businesses, I would have thought, to determine in consultation with the employee, and obviously what is important for their business. So one way or another, I think flexible working is here to stay, and it does pose obvious legal implications, obviously, which we will no doubt discuss on this webinar, and very much direct and indirect legal implications, such as altering contracts and policies and risk assessments, and a whole host of health and safety issues, together with changing job advertisements and ensuring that they're legally compliant. And then the less obvious indirect legal implications, which are the practical effects it has on disadvantaging certain groups of people, such as disabled staff or those with caring responsibility. And then there's the issue of presenteeism in terms of awards and benefits and promotions being afforded to those who are physically present in the office, and those who work less hours or work remotely getting forgotten. So it runs a whole host of sort of legal issues around discrimination, and it's going to be a lively debate, I'm sure. So I will,
Thank you, Fiona.
on that note, pass you back to Donna.
Thank you. Well, I've just done a quick count of the votes as best I can, and it looks like it's 50-50. There's 2, 4, 6. There's about 7 people, both for the yeses and the nos in there. So I think we're going to see this time and time again where opinion is split. Andrew, you and I had a very interesting conversation yesterday, because when I raised flexible working with you, you said, oh yes, but we're working flexibly. And I said, yes, but all your staff are working, are able to work from home, and we've written your policies and changed your policies to make that the default now, rather than you having to request it. But when I said to you, well, what happens if they want to work part-time, or what happens if they want to work 10 days hours, so in effect 2 weeks, but they want to work it over 9 days? And you sort of said, oh, hadn't thought about flexible working like that. Do you want to just tell us what you have done in terms of flexible working for your staff, because you've moved the culture quite significantly?
Yeah, I mean, it started really, we were fortunate that it started with your help about 2 years ago, May 19. We're a firm of chartered accountants, I'm the managing partner, and it was initially for us the worry was about accountability. Can we trust people to do their jobs properly? And if you like, diligently, if we can't monitor them? So we actually had to shift our sort of viewpoint about how we measure performance from how it's done to really outcomes. And I think this big shift for us was about an appreciation that the more we trust our people, the more they will actually rise to the challenge of being trustworthy. I mean, there are exceptions, I know, but generally it has worked very well. And for us, I think it was also an understanding that I think the employee dynamic is changing. It's very much, we were very much traditional firm, parent to child sort of thing, psychological talk. And now it's about, more an adult relationship, which I think actually in the long run is a bit more sustainable. It doesn't get away from the fact that we have to, obviously train our more junior staff, and that is more benefits. It's more beneficial in the office when the people are working together than remotely. But once they've got the initial, the first stages overall, new joiners, then if you've got good cloud-based IT systems, it helps. So when the pandemic broke, we were sort of prepared for it. And to me, one of the things we do is we did do actually every single day. We did have an all-firm Zoom meeting for the first 10 or 15 minutes. I actually did a poll this morning, actually in readiness for today, and I asked all my people at our Friday meeting, what they felt about number one. I actually asked them three things. You want me to tell you what I asked them?
Go on, we'll have all three.
From an employee's point of view, I said to them, number one, do they feel happier, unhappy, or just the same with our flexible working policy, which I said is more about office and home, because hours people work is more of a challenge. And actually 85% said, well, actually 89% said they were happier now that we have more of a balance. Then I then asked them, what's the ideal balance now, because it's changed, how much in the office, how much at home, and 70% said 1 to 2 days in the office. The rest were very happy, either 1 or 2, 5 days. Most of them, actually, the rest of them were just only occasionally. The third poll was, do they think this legislation is a good thing and should be mandatory? And 85% said, yes, it should become mandatory. Now, that's the employee's point of view. My point of view has just been sort of maybe finessed a bit by Fiona from the point of view of, more about office and home than it is about hours, because communication is obviously important. And if it starts becoming so flexible that communication becomes an issue as to when you can speak to people, then I think that's the devil's in the detail. But we've made it successful. I mean, we've got very good IT systems, which I think is essential. And apart from just the culture, online, filing systems, being cloud-based, things like GoVox, which I think you may know about, and we can explain further if necessary, it makes us aware of people's emotional well-being on a weekly basis. But I have to say, lastly, when it goes slightly awry, and sorting our problems out obviously is important as well. So
yeah, no, absolutely.
In a nutshell, those are that's our sort of transition. But it is, I would say, it's working very successfully, and so much so that we went to much smaller accommodation. We only have for about desks for about 1/3 of our people. So we just have we're making it work, and I would say from a financial point of view, it's been very good for us. We've been, without going into more detail, it's been a very profitable year, thank goodness. Didn't expect it, but for most of our clients, I would say it's a mixed bag. I wouldn't like to say.
We'll come back to the clients in a minute, because I think they'll have
to talk to you about different clients in different situations, and it's not as easy. We're a professional service environment, which is a service rather than a product. So that gives you what you wanted.
Lovely, thank you. Okay. Barry, you brought your team back into the office as quickly as you possibly could, which is a little bit, I kind of look at what you guys do, and you enable people to work remotely as a business.
Yes.
But you chose to bring everybody back in as quickly as possible. Tell us why.
Okay. If I may, Donna, I'm just going to read the little 1-minute bio I prepared, because it sets in as to my business, our business, and to what we do.
Lovely.
And then I'm going to try and answer your question. Barry Kaye, COO of Telcoswitch. We are a unified comms tech software business. What that means is that we provide voice and video and omni-channel solutions and telephony to over 100,000 people in the UK.
Just tell me what
today.
omni-channel means, because I don't understand that term. I'm sure others don't either.
That is new and it is exciting, and we haven't launched our product, and I know it's not a pitch now, but essentially omnichannel is ultimately a piece of software for a call center that, for a call center agent, will allow many channels of communication to be filtered into one web screen. For example, a live tweet, a live WhatsApp message to your business phone number, an SMS, a text, a Facebook message, a voice call, all that coming in through one aggregated feed directly into your typically a web browser. And
so when we're
telephony
seeing
as well.
articles on the BBC website where members of the public are getting frustrated that the reason that they're getting rubbish customer service right now is because staff are working from home, this in effect is a way of improving customer service regardless of where staff are working, and that would be one application of it.
Absolutely. Also very much for businesses and their perception. So it's very easy for a person to phone in to a call center, maybe sit on hold for 10 minutes, half an hour, and get very frustrated. But then they turn, and in the modern world, to a social media feed, onto Twitter, and post something saying, I have been on hold to this particular company's telephone line for half an hour, disgraceful service. I myself went through it. We bought a television from a high street retailer during lockdown. There was an issue with it, but the moment I turned to pop a post onto their Twitter feed, my goodness, they reacted fast.
Yes, I've had it as well. I understand
Yes.
that. Okay, so
Okay.
in a way, facilitating increased flexible working from home, geographically diverse workforce.
Absolutely. So
Okay.
indulge me just a second, because I wanted to go on to some of my other points. So we as a business, we employ about 100 staff. We have 3 principal offices in the UK. We're based in West London, that's HQ, and we have an office in Coventry and an office in Manchester. Of our staff, about 25% are flexi working aside, 25% are about home-based contracts, and 75% are office-based contracts, at least on paper. We are a aggressively fast-growing business. We ranked in the top quartile of last summer's Sunday Times Tech Track. And it's not about blowing our own trumpet, but it's just about the nature of our business is that we're not steady Eddie at the minute. We are a fast-growing, very aggressive, fast-moving business. And we have a huge number of objectives self-imposed by the management team, and also by our desires to grow the business. And so perhaps our needs may be different from other businesses that are in the stable state. So to answer your question finally, Donna, why did I rush everybody back? Just want everybody and the business back to work. And that comes very much from the needs must, obviously for the pandemic over the last year, the new shift, the work from home culture. And I think that is at the essence, ultimately, of what we're talking about in terms of flexibility. But my view, and it is a view, and perhaps from experience and have it for a number of years, and moving up from a junior to a senior role, people need to be in the office. Especially, we employ a lot of young staff, not intentionally, it's just the way of things, but it's very difficult to describe, and I don't know everybody. Obviously I could see the people on the panel but not our attendees, but there is so much benefit to being around, as the Americans call it, around the water cooler, and meeting people in the office. And let's not forget some of the more subtle stuff, the multicultural aspect of meeting people from different walks of life, and your new peers, and going to the pub and the drinks, and all of that sometimes just gets lost. And I've spent a year on video calls talking to my employees, various teams, Zoom meetings several times a day, group meetings. And I always say with the greatest respect, I've got a lot of people sitting in bedrooms at home, sitting in beds in one-room flats, people sharing offices, sharing internet connectivity. It's just, in my opinion, it's just not right. You need to be in the office, you need to get out of the house, you need to be fit, you need to be healthy, you need to get up, have a shower, get on the train, buy cup of very expensive coffee when you get off at the other end, if that's your nature. That's all part of growing up and building your career.
Lovely. Barry, thank you very much. And I see that very much firsthand with my son, who is 20 and has just started an internship. And the days that he's actually going into the office, he comes home buzzing because he's learning so much and just getting that experience of being in the office for the first time. Thank you. Richard, you have got some people in the office, some people at home, some people working through quite challenging home environments, some of which Barry's just touched on. And some of your staff are part-time as well. So you've got a whole mixture that you're dealing with quite a small team. Flexible working as a right as opposed to a request. What's your view?
I think very simply, I think we all agree that flexible working intrinsically is a good thing. And I think the pandemic has shown us all that there are so many more ways we can collaborate remotely than perhaps people thought. But I come down very firmly on the side of no when it comes to as a right and as a right from day one. I think it puts employers, particularly small employers, in an almost impossible position in terms of trying to onboard and recruit the right people and induct effectively. Yes, just quickly on my business and my background. I've always worked in the creative industry sector, and I've worked for 3 small private companies before I started my own business nearly 20 years ago. That industry and that culture has a fairly flexible working attitude, I think, in general. And also I've always worked around many people who intrinsically work remotely, often salespeople, whether it's UK field salespeople or global or regional business managers. So remote working has always been a part of my experience. Our business, which is, as I said, 19 years old, is small, but we're a recruitment business, and we learn every day as a recruiter that we're dealing with people. And one of the things here is that everybody's different. Everyone has different needs and desires. Our company, as you said, has a mix of part-time, home workers, office workers, and some doing some flexible working home and office. And I think all of those things we as an employer absolutely want to support and embrace. I think there's a massive difference between hybrid home working and exclusive home working. An interesting conversation. Actually, funnily enough, this week I went to a Chamber of Commerce event locally in Kingston-on-Thames, where we're based, and got into a chat with some other guests about this home working issue, flexible working. And somebody made the point, very, very fair point, which is that if the government and legislation pushes the right to home working too far, that can backfire, because once you are obliged as an employer to offer home working potentially permanently, then you start to look for where you can recruit the best people at the most economic value, and that probably isn't in the UK. And we've seen, incredibly increasing levels of quality and service and capability from offshore workers over the last 2 or 3 years, with tech making it better and the quality of some of those offshore workers getting much, much better. We work with a firm who have some offshore delivery people who are amazing, and I wouldn't have given that credit to work 3 or 4 years ago. So
I know. Sorry, quite loud reverberation there. I know a number of clients who outsource to the Philippines, and other than the occasional disruption due to earthquakes, they are working, and they will work UK hours. They will put in those contacts, and they work across all areas of the business, from finance to marketing to call center delivery. So yes, I think that's a very real risk coming up.
So I think that's one factor, but I think the bit about the right from day one is just for me taking legislation too far. I think there should be guidelines. I think the legislation that's already in place seems to be quite robust and sensible. The fact that there's a right to request after 26 weeks is good. I think sensible employers, smart employers, companies that are thinking for this generation and beyond will embrace that in a positive way, and should do. And as Andrew said earlier, that management culture is shifting quite fast from possibly more old-fashioned views to more 2021 and beyond views. I employ people aged between early 20s and mid 60s, and there's some quite different cultural attitudes and expectations there. And certainly we see new employees that we're looking to employ and bring in are very interested and focused on the question of flexible working options. But I don't think everyone expects that you can get through an induction with a business necessarily remotely, or demanding the right to be remote or have flexible hours, because communication needs to work, so hours need to be fixed in line with the business needs. And just proximity, I mean, that ability to learn and be inspired and be mentored and just assimilate the company culture, the ethos, the way you do things, the way you talk, the way you interact with your customers, very difficult to do that remotely on a video call. And the other thing is, I think Barry mentioned about the water cooler moment. By the way, we work in the US a lot, but I think these things apply sort of globally. These remote relationships, they work, and tech has made it better, and it's making it better all the time, but they're flat. And I think we're all starting to, the novelty's wearing off after 18 months of lots of Zoom and lots of team and making it work as well as we can. But I think the relationships are flatter. There's not that buzz, that sort of chemistry, that sort of energy you get in the room, just chatting at the beginning of the day, just buzzing on a subject, or you get more powerful, creative, I think, collaboration together. So I think there's a blend between facilitating flexible working, which is absolutely important and should happen, and it seems that it already is in place with legislation. But I think the moment you put a forced right for flexible working for day one and impact on how employers have to recruit and advertise and select employees, you're just inviting another type of discrimination around employees that can't hire from day one remotely, or just it wouldn't make any sense for their business. So I don't know how that gets managed. So that's probably enough for the moment, and you get my view on that.
Thank you. Liz, you're in a slightly different position because you sit between the employer and the employees. Roughly how many employers, I don't know whether you've asked this question, when you take on a vacancy, if you were to say to your clients, is this a flexible working, or can people work from home, or can it be a job share, or can it be 0 hours contracts, or how many of your employers will say, yes, of course, we're flexible, and say absolutely, and versus those who say absolutely not, they have to be here Monday to Friday, 9 to 5?
That's an interesting one, because obviously things have changed quite significantly. As Donna indicated, I'm a solo recruiter, so I don't have staff. I don't have these issues myself, but I'm liaising always with candidates and with clients who have different feelings on this. The clients that have I've been speaking with recently, who have positions with me recently, are still quite prescriptive in how things were before the pandemic. Generally, they're office-based roles. Generally, it's a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5:30. And on the whole, a lot of the clients still have a balance of, some are still working remotely and some are in the office. New positions registered are going back to the format of, at the moment, we're doing this, but as soon as everyone can be back in the office, we'll go back and it will be an office-based role.
So the intention is very much for a return to the office, and people are recruiting on the basis of you're coming in on a temporary working arrangement,
yes,
but the permanent will be.
The permanent will be an office-based position.
Okay. And when candidates are registering with you, what are they asking for now?
They're all asking for flexible working. That's the question that everybody asks. Is it working flexibly? Can it be working from home? Is it working from home? How many days is working from home? Some people have an assumption that it will be working from home for a certain amount of days post-pandemic. And some clients I know are considering and knowing they have to change their way of thinking. Others are robustly, we need everybody in the office. And that obviously may change, but right now, and so some candidates that are resolute in that, no, I'm going to wait out, I've enjoyed working from home, or I've enjoyed the flexibility, and that's on the whole the highest percentage. People, I think the novelty has worn off. A lot of people are being at home and they enjoy the balance of a few days in the office and a few days at home. But as I say, everybody's different, but that's on the whole what's coming through.
What are you seeing in terms of hours as opposed to the location of the work? Are you
Nobody's
seeing...
asking hours. Nobody's asking if they can do different hours in different ways, a longer day and a finish early on a Friday type situation. It's all the location of the work. Can I work from home? How many days can I work from home?
Interesting. Have any of you had people asking to go part-time or to do different things with hours?
I've had a couple of situations on that in the last year or two and before, actually. But our business does support and accommodate a little bit of flexible hours because we're so international, as you said at the beginning.
Right, so you're working across time zones, so it works quite well.
One of my team, two of my team during the furlough and post-furlough era was interesting. One very much wanted to stay working from home, and one very much wanted to come back to the office, and that was just different personal circumstance. Since then, we've accommodated and supported requests for occasional work from home, so and we're quite fluid and flexible about that. That works well. But perhaps we're not a rigid firm because we're very small and we work in the sort of industry which is used to having some fairly flexible hours anyway. But I think we've certainly seen an increase in engagement and commitment from our team because of that additional flexibility.
But that flexibility is coming from work location rather than hours.
From mostly, although we've had requests on hours too, sometimes to start earlier, finish earlier, but a bit more of an ad hoc flexi thing rather than a permanent thing. My office manager has always been part-time, and we've always embraced for certain roles part-time as a possibility that we will employ, but it doesn't work for all roles in the business because some roles need to be permanently available and permanently engaged, and we need continuity of the same individual delivering that job. It would be hard to do job share on some of our functional roles within the search business that we operate. Just touching on the employer request, you were talking earlier to Elizabeth on this question. We don't see it generally as a high priority specification with roles we take on, but that's probably because they're polarized. Either, well, of course this is remote and flexible because it's a regional sales or management role, or it's, say, an engineering role in a lab and it absolutely has to happen, on premise. So I haven't yet come across the sort of expectation that an office-based role might need to be or might want to be more flexible, and certainly candidates that we're registering and placing aren't really bringing it up, although there's always been an assumption in management roles that, yes, I would expect to be able to do this remotely. And it comes down to an employer by employer and client by client preference. Some are very receptive to it and culturally have totally embraced it across their global business. Some are absolutely against it and want all their team in an office location. And that's just sort of ad hoc. We're recruiting in the office at the moment for 2 or 3 positions, and I will say that I think at least 2 of those applicants have put that flexible working question quite high on the agenda in the first conversations.
Okay, Fiona, what are we seeing happening? I know that there's an increase in sort of the discrimination claims around redundancies when companies have made people redundant as a result of COVID and that sort of thing. Are we seeing anything around flexible working where people aren't working in the locations they want? Are those coming through yet in the employment tribunals?
Not yet. It's going to happen because workplaces are still very much, they've got their workforce at home still, where they're office based in any event. And I think come the 19th, then a lot of businesses are going to start getting their staff back, and there's going to be a lot more requests. People have worked in ways we've never worked before, and they've got used to it. And it's very difficult now because it puts businesses in a very tricky position. So there have been a number of tribunal cases, as you said, in relation to COVID and health and safety claims, some of which have been successful, surprisingly, but there haven't been in relation to flexible working, but that's likely to come in the next year to 2 years. So yeah, it needs to be very much on employers' radar, how they deal with these requests, whether they need to be dealt with in the usual way, whether we need to be as prescriptive in dealing with it via your flexible working policies, or whether you're going to be a bit more relaxed in the approach that you take. But I think businesses need to be very careful, because if the wrong approach is taken and you don't follow your set sort of procedures, then it's going to get scrutinized in a tribunal.
Okay, and I'm assuming that those are discrimination based claims, so people
Yeah, exactly. And it will be
Yeah.
very different depending on each person. So obviously, you know, somebody putting in a flexible working request who's just returned from maternity leave is going to be sort of very different to somebody who's requesting it for sort of health and safety reasons. And then obviously, if you've got somebody just requesting it because they're happy with the sort of not having to commute anymore, it's going to be a lot trickier from sort of a discrimination or health and safety perspective to argue it. But I think, yeah, they're going to come in, but they haven't done as yet.
Barry, have you had any requests from people to change their working locations or to work different hours?
Certainly no for the hours, although I would be delighted to move some of my functions, for example, the support and help desk functions, to an earlier start and later finish, on more shift-based pattern.
I was going to say on a shift.
On a shift, but I'm not. But that's not really answering your question. No, I haven't had a request. I have had a strange one recently, which I think is slightly off topic, is that someone, and I can't say who, so we may need to discuss it offline later. So someone has just moved. So someone in an office-based role has just moved about 2 hours away from the office.
Wow. And have they assumed that they will be able to work from home? Is that
they've asked the question based on an assumption? But anyway, perhaps we can
we'll take that one
discuss
offline.
the resolution on the next panel. But notwithstanding, no is the answer to your question. No. I'm surprised, but no.
I've got an interesting question that's been asked in the chat from Gavin at Streamline. They are a surgical and healthcare provider. I now have clinicians and staff wanting to work from home. I'm feeling uncomfortable about agreeing to flexible working, as this seems to suit the employee rather than the business and our patients' needs. I would potentially look at 1 in 5 days working from home. I believe in work well-being, and it's important to work together on a regular basis. So that's people who are having client contact, and because a lot of that contact now is on Zoom rather than in a consulting room, people are wanting to work remotely. Andrew, would you allow one of your clients to consult with, I'm trying to think, you would go on site with a client rather than them coming to you generally?
I would say no. It's 50-50 if you had to. Our situation is, they would, it could be done either way. So no, there isn't that.
Would you prefer people to meet in person in an office, or are you happy with clients meeting with individual accountants online?
The amazing thing is that I think this, I call it a home office rather than flexible, I think has been, I mean, we've got over 1,000 clients, and almost every single one bar one has managed to get through this pandemic. And the reason for the SMEs, they've been so robust, surprisingly, as we probably have or tried to do as well. So it's accelerated their innovation. It's accelerated their change mentality. So I think actually now it becomes a matter of, it's not an essential to spend that time traveling. Yes, I prefer initially to see a client when we first meet up with them and we look at each other in the eye and we form a bond of trust. But thereafter, I think it becomes very much the situation that dictates it. We can share everything that's necessary. So I don't think it's as essential, nothing like what I thought originally. But I do think the things I do think you point out, and I think I agree with the early start businesses, the businesses that have a lot of junior people that need training, that face-to-face part of it initially is absolutely essential, more mature businesses. But also because, as I said before, IT business, we need a phenomenal amount of IT, our business does, to function. We need phenomenally good IT people in-house to make sure everybody is functioning and communicating. That's an expense. There's a huge expense initially. So if they bring in the legislation very quickly, I'm not sure people can gear up. And the other thing is culture. It takes a while to embed this, although we've had to move quite quickly. The cultures have to catch up with it. So it becomes, it's a sort of a moving feast, but I do think it's more of a challenge for all of us, timing, than it is actually, and it depends on the circumstances. We all need to communicate at certain times within certain parameters, be it 8 till 6 or 8 till 7. So people can work from 8 till 4, or from 9-10 till 6 or 7.
Oh, because you've moved to core hours.
Becomes problematical. Results only working environment. They do it when they feel like doing it. I would think becomes a huge problem, not only for us, but for our clients as well.
So you've got core hours in your business, haven't you?
We have got core hours, but on the other hand, we have people who work in India, Kenya, all around the UK, having to adapt to our hours as well. So core hours is important, and that is something I really feel very aggrieved about if we had to change and allow that, because it just becomes a real problem with verbal communication. With Teams, this sort of thing, we're communicating by audio all the time, by visually, audibly, etc., by text or by messaging. So that would be a huge thing to get around.
I had a conversation with somebody who used to work in a PR agency, in a marketing agency, and what he was saying is that when the juniors and the more junior staff write copy, it needs to be seen and signed off by a senior before it can go to the client, before it can go out of the door. And if the junior chooses to work from, I don't know, 4 p.m. till 10 p.m. because those working hours suit them, then they're never going to have any contact with their line manager. So when they're talking about giving people the right to work flexibly, they're not just talking about location, they're talking about hours. And it may be, term time only, in which case you may have 30 or 36 weeks of the year where you have that staff member actually available to you. Barry, you've got no term time only staff, have you?
No.
No. Would you take on someone who was term time only?
You're recording?
I am, I'm afraid.
Listen, it depends on the role. So most, if not all, the roles within the business are full-time year-round. So I would say no.
Right. Okay. I guess if you're providing services to schools, and we've got a number of clients who are, they need some of their staff year-round, but actually they need some of their staff or most of their staff to be available term time to go into the schools or to support the kids with their academic work. So for those people, actually, they are looking for term time, but they need term time plus. They can't start and finish at the same time. And that's actually, the plus is proving to be a challenge for those people. I've got another question here. I think, Fiona, this one might be for you. If employees are working from, oh, it just jumped, hold on. If employees are working from home, can the employer pay them less as they no longer have travel costs? Or do we have to take their home working costs into consideration? Then do we do a health and safety implication? Then do we have a health and safety implication to ensure that they're working safely and in the right office environment, chair, desk set up correctly? I'll ask Fiona to answer that first, and then Andrew, just for you to explain what you did when you sent everybody home. Fiona?
Yeah, I think there are a number of questions within that one question, but just to break it down. So employees who are working from home or have been allowed to continue working from home, in terms of paying them less as they don't have their travel costs, I mean, no, your pay is your pay, and it's very much a contractual thing. So it would depend on what your terms are within your contract. So generally you get a set hourly rate of pay, and if there is a certain clause in your contract which relates to travel expenses, then it may well be that you can revisit that, but it is unlikely. Yes, in terms of working from home costs, there's no sort of legal right for employees to have allowances to work from home as such, in terms of extra provision being provided for use of their electricity and internet and whatever else. But employers are under an obligation, regardless of where employees work, whether it's in the office or it's remote, to ensure an individual's health and safety and to undertake a risk assessment, and to ensure that if they've got a computer in front of them, that the display screen equipment and health and safety legislation obviously still applies to home working. Yeah. So in that respect, it's very much an important factor to take into consideration.
Andrew,
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Andrew, do you just want to expand on that, the expenses for working from home? Because there is a tax implication there, isn't there?
I think is it the £6 a week allowance that people can receive. I think it's more or less voluntary. We don't actually do it, but other people do, and they sort of, if you like, finesse it against the costs they save in travelling. So it's not extensively used, I know, to clients, but it can be used to defray some of the extra costs of people receiving.
So it's a £6 a week allowance from HMRC, which some employers pay. And then I found out recently that actually, if the employer doesn't pay it, people can claim it directly from HMRC. Is that correct?
They can claim the expense as a taxable deduction against their earnings, which is a little bit different. So, no, HMRC don't give them the £6 a week, as far as I know. No, they don't. But I mean, as you quite rightly said, as the owner pointed out, the cost of setting people up, they have to have. We went through an extensive health and safety procedure, which you helped us with, and to make sure they're not just sitting around, on their settees or on the other side of their bed in a bed sit, that they've got proper desk facilities and chairs and double screens and all the other paraphernalia that you need. So it is an expense to set people up properly, but most of us, I think, now through the pandemic have actually made sure that happens. But I did notice a large number of clients did not actually put those health and safety procedures in place, which must be a problem, I think, if they didn't actually confront those issues. But I'm sure nowadays, I think people have come up to speed.
And I think you had the advantage that you were downsizing the office, and therefore people took their desks and their chairs.
Yeah, we did.
And office furniture home.
Yeah, we had the benefit of a break clause in our lease, which allowed us to downsize and save considerably from January onwards. You were obviously getting rid of a lot of furniture and that sort of thing. So people just more or less took all those things home, and so we had that benefit. But it is, if you haven't got that, it is a reasonable cost to set somebody up properly from home and know they're working not only safely, but they're also working productively as well.
I think just as a side point as well, there is also the issue that some employees get paid an additional amount as London waiting if they work in London, and again, that's very much a contractual issue, what the wording says, but also expenses policies will need to be looked at. I mean, some employees will claim certain expenses if they're travelling to client sites from the office, and it's whether they can claim additional expenses if they're travelling from home, which could be a lot further. So it is an issue, yes.
So Adi has asked, does London waiting now drop off? I don't know who the best answer. Does anyone pay London waiting? Barry, you're sort of in London. Richard, you're London-ish.
And we don't pay London waiting. We pay what we need to pay to compete to employ people. But I don't think we're conscious of the London waiting idea. I thought that went out about years ago. But
I think it depends on the sector. Yeah. Barry?
Ditto exactly what Richard said.
Fine. Elizabeth, do you still get people advertising jobs with London waiting or out of London waiting? Is that something that you see?
London waiting, yes. Yeah, London waiting has been not. I haven't worked with a client recently during the pandemic time that has, and so I don't have anything going forward. But on the whole, yes. But it is industry specific, I think. But yeah, London waiting is still a thing.
Lovely. And a couple of people have said, so Keith has said that HMRC will give a tax allowance of £6 per week where the employer doesn't pay. This equates to £1.20 or £2.40 per week actual cash, dependent on the individual's marginal tax rate.
And that means whether they're a 20% taxpayer or 40%.
Or 40%, right.
Or 45% taxpayer.
In non-coronavirus time, £6 a week is only payable if the employment contract requires the employee to work from home. So I think that's something that we're going to need to watch.
And I think, but Andrew can correct me, you can claim the £6 a week back from HMRC for the entire period of the last year if you've been working from home. So you don't need to do it on a continual basis. You can actually look to recover it for the entire year.
The employee can, or the employer can?
The employee, but Andrew will guide you better. But the employee can claim that back from HMRC and put in a submission for the previous year if that's what they're claiming for.
Okay, so we've got just 10 minutes or 8 minutes left. If you've got any questions, please do drop them into the chat. I was going to take the Q&A, but people have used the chat function instead, so that's absolutely fine. So if anybody's got any questions, please do pop them in. 10 days in 9, so where people are working longer days for 9 days and get a day off every 2 weeks. I know a couple of clients that offer that. Interestingly, they don't allow all of their staff to take the same day off, so they still have the cover, and that's been done very, very specifically. I was also talking to somebody over the weekend, or at the beginning of this week actually, who does 3-day weekends. And they give all of the staff Friday off. Now, interestingly, again, it's very much controlled by the employer. So the employees can't decide that they want their 3-day weekend to be Saturday, Sunday, Monday, because that's not what the company's offering. The company, they only gained an hour and a half on their contractual terms. So they're working longer days for 4 days, but they get every Friday off. So I'm hearing of companies becoming more innovative and really offering greater flexibility to their staff, but without actually offering that flexibility because it's being done within management control. Is that going to be the future? Are companies going to say, well, actually, if my staff want flexibility, this is how it's going to be done? Does anyone have a view?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. And I think it's about being competitive and commercially viable. And I think it's the antithesis of legislating this. You know, there's a great example of a company making flexible arrangements for its workforce that still suit the business and probably make it a more attractive and competitive employer. And we, as a small employer in Kingston-on-Thames, we're trying to compete for talent. And we'll do everything we can to be attractive and competitive, whether that's what we pay people or the benefits we wrap around it. And if flexible working, which is becoming more and more of a thing and more important, that will automatically be part of that, you know, comp and ben conversation.
So it's positioning.
But it's not legislated and it's not obligatory. The moment it is, that's a very different thing to manage. And I think there's a bit of naivety in the campaigning or in those in government who are proposing that this move to be compulsory, because there's a lot of things that might be being overlooked. And I think businesses are smart and will adapt and will evolve to what the sort of consumer demand and the cultural expectation is. I'd just like to say one thing quickly on the issue around not just expense for catering for home working, but also there's a big issue around data and security, which I think gets overlooked, to do with communications and to do with, you know, you can't just say to someone, you know, you've got a laptop, you've got a Mac at home, you know, use that. You've got to make sure they've got proper tech that's secure, that's audited, that's safe. And that, for a small employer, for someone like us, for example, that's going to put another, not only £2,000 or £3,000 onto the capital expenditure of kitting up for a new employee, but the time to get it set up and organized. And that's, for a small business, that's a lot of hassle. And I think you need to be able to do that when you're ready, and when you're ready to invest in someone who's proven that they're assimilated into the business and they have the necessary skills and training. So that whole probationary period is there for a reason. And I think the final piece, which is so easy to overlook, is the value of that assimilation that goes through proximity. You know, the moment you have more and more people remotely doing their jobs and delivering their roles, whether that's call center roles or analysts or researchers or customer facing people, if you can't hear what they're doing and they can't hear peers and colleagues and possibly more senior people and more experienced people in their business doing what they do, they won't learn and they won't grow and they won't develop. And then you'll end up with just a lot of detachment within the business. So I think that's a really important area to be careful about when it comes to legislating.
Okay.
I agree with Richard. I mean, the biggest challenge facing our clients generally is not the lack of business or obtaining more income by way of sales, it's lack of talent. And increasingly, the biggest moan I've got received from clients, certainly over the last 2 or 3 months, is there isn't the talent around. So you would do anything to get talented people. And a business, I believe, most businesses are only as good as the talented people they have, allowing for technology, etc. So getting talented people, you will roll over. You will build for 4 days a week. This is the way it's going to be going, and I think this is going an increasing problem because of all restrictions brought in by Brexit, etc. That it's feeding all the way through. So lack of people and lack of talent, I think it's going to propel forward the benefits that we're going to give to staff. But at the same time, you don't want people clock watching all the time, saying, "Well, I've done my 7.5 hours, therefore I'll take another, 9 hours. I'll take." Whereas we've got an environment where it's give and take, and most people want that. So, if you have to work 8 or 9 hours a day, and other days it's fine to come off for 6 hours, then that's okay. But it does induce a sort of a clock watching mentality once you start going into 3-day weekends and all this sort of thing, which I think to us wouldn't be particularly beneficial.
Oh, okay. Barry, I've got a question for you. How are calls now recorded and archived with work from home, etc.? Now, actually,
I started to type an answer, and I'm so pleased you've asked me because it's such a long answer, Donna. So, Addy,
you've only got about a minute to answer it, Barry.
All right, I'll be super quick. So listen, the truth of the matter is this, that with a VoIP or an IP-based telephony platform, all calls flow through our cloud-based servers anyway. They are physical servers, but they're essentially cloud for all intents and purposes, this conversation. We have, as part of our solution, a call compliant recording platform. So the reality is that if somebody based at home is using a business soft phone or something akin to Zoom on their computer, then the calls are flowing through exactly the same way as if they were in the office and had unplugged the office phone and plugged it in at home, same as. But absolutely, as Addy may be hinting at, if people are using their own personal mobiles or personal home phones for calls, then obviously that's out of the bounds of the business themselves.
Yeah. And that actually also creates a bit of a GDPR thing. And if you have a staffing issue and a staff member puts in a subject access request, what people have done on their own mobiles and on their own phones is outside of the control of the business. So it's really, really important that when you set people up to work from home, that you do think about communications, not just with clients, but amongst your own team, and whether they're using their own phones or whether they're using company phones, or whether you say actually all company communications has to be within Teams or Slack or the 101 other software platforms that are out there, which can be used as a company system, because then the company still has control and takes responsibility for the content of those systems. And certainly I've seen a couple of subject access requests where the subject says, oh, well, this was, I want a copy of this. It was sent by my line manager on this date and you haven't submitted it. It's not within the company system. So that's something that as an employer, you need to be very, very mindful of as the tools, whether it's a phone, whether it's a laptop, whether it's a mobile, that you're giving your staff. And as Richard said, that has huge setup costs. As Barry said, there are technological platforms available to help people do that. So we are out of time, unbelievably. And I do kind of feel like we've only scratched the surface in some ways. I found this book, Flexible Working Practices. It was part of my study set back, I'm just going to say before the year 2000, but this one was actually published 98, 99. Flexible working has been around for a very, very long time. Working from home concept has become a lot easier over the last, I would say even 4 or 5 years as technology has improved. But I've spent 25 years of my HR career helping employers to say no, because flexible working won't possibly work. You can't possibly work from home and be effective. And there has been a massive shift. And I don't think we're done with that shift yet. I think that, as Richard said, we are going to have to position ourselves as employers of choice. As Liz has alluded to, employers still want full-time and staff want part-time, or staff want to work from home and employers want them in their office. And until there is more equality in that equation, until there is more balance, then there is going to be conflict and there are going to be challenges. the question, as Fiona laid out for us at the beginning, is what happens in that legislation? Is it going to be an automatic right to flexible working? And if so, what's the detail of that? Because to have to advertise every single job as flexible, there's a new challenge for you, Richard and Liz. You know, convincing your clients that actually this is what the law says now, and we're not there yet. But it's going to be important for everybody, as both panelists and attendees today, to keep an eye on that and to make sure you have a voice and make sure you have an opinion and make sure that the voice of business continues to be heard, so that we don't have handcuffs put on us by legislation and that we're free to, you know, take informed decisions about what's right for our businesses. A couple of people have asked if this is going to be available. I have recorded it. I will get it up probably on our YouTube channel, because that's the most public way of getting it out there, so that people do have access to it. Liz, do you want to just tell people where they can find you?
Yes, certainly. Thank you. I'm Liz Chapman. I'm a solo recruiter. My business is EC Appointments. I'm based in Hertfordshire and I recruit generally from office-based positions from juniors up to senior management.
Richard, where do we find you online?
We find Interfacio, interfacio.com, at Interfacio on various channels. We're in Kingston on Thames. And if you work in music, audio, television or entertainment technology, or you're in marketing and business, then we're always interested.
Lovely. Barry?
Telcoswitch.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm super easy to find. And if you can't find me, ask Donna and she'll track me down.
That sounds like a plan. Andrew, how do we find you?
SobellRhodes.co.uk. Main office, got 2 other offices. The main office is in Elstree, Hertfordshire. Can't miss it, in the Elstree shopping area, just as you come in. So, and yeah, be happy to see people face to face as well as online as well in the future.
And I think you're at Sobell Rhodes is your handle on social media.
Is it? Okay.
I think so. I tagged quite a few people this morning on Twitter. Liz, I couldn't find you on Twitter this morning. I don't know that you're there. Fiona, where do we find you?
Thank you. So it's seddons.co.uk. I'm Fiona.Mendel at seddons.co.uk, and really happy to help with any legal queries you may have around this employment minefield.
And I know she's good because she used to work for me. So yes.
And that's because you were the employer of choice and you had flexibility going for you and stood out from the crowd. So I think there's a lot to be said for it, attracting good candidates and allowing flexibility. It's all about, offering that and obviously making it work for your business as well. It
can work, as long as we don't have it as a noose around our necks. Thank you very, very much to everybody that has attended today. I hope you have found it useful. As I said, the time's gone far quicker than I thought it was going to do. And if you've got any questions, then please do contact either myself or a member of the panel. We'd be more than happy to help. Thank you very much and have a fantastic weekend.
Thanks for inviting me, Donna.
Thank you, panel. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.